enjoy about education is it's an opportunity to challenge you and use your mind to solve problems. One of the beauties of this program is working on problems that affect the environment. And the environment and this Mother Earth is what we have. You know the challenges that we're seeking and the challenges that we have faced. Now, before I introduce John Cortines, look at your badge. Your badge should have a star on it. Yes, you are a star, but you have a particular color on your star. You're going to be divided up into groups based on your star. I know how it is. Birds of a feather flock together. So everybody in the center has been kind of hanging out with each other. But we need you to mix and mingle to get to know others across this CSC challenge. Stands are almost empty. Thank you for joining us down here. So I have the opportunity and the privilege of introducing our next speaker who's going to issue this challenge for us. And just some housekeeping things. If you've not downloaded the app and you need some assistance, please visit the registration desk. Wi-Fi is free. We also have a link to that if you've not discovered it yet. So if you need particular help with that, please do that. And I will, once John Cortines gives his opening and challenge, I'll come back and tell you where the groups are going to sit. So, but let me introduce John Cortines. He's director of the Atlantic Oceanographic and Meteorological Laboratory. He's a member of the federal government's Senior Executive Service. Now he's someone you need to meet, huh? Dr. Cortines has served 9 years as director, and I had to get the, NOAA has all these acronyms. And I saw this one, OWAC, OWAQ. Now I want you to figure that one out. Now I know you got your phones out Googling it. What is OWAQ? It's NOAA's research program to improve NOAA National Weather Service products and services for high impact weather events. In this office, he also oversaw NOAA's U.S. Weather Research Program, the Joint Technology Transfer Initiative, and he hosted the National Earth System Prediction Capability Project Office. Dr. Cortines has extensive experience transitioning research to operations, particularly through the USWRP and the JTTI. Would you do me a great big favor and welcome Dr. Cortines with a round of applause?
Okay, well, we don't have a lot of time, but this is a perfect example of what it's like to work as a government employee. And as a senior executive, for sure. You really learn to make do, because these kinds of things do happen. So let me first take a minute and say thank you. First of all, thank you for all of you for showing up. Thank you to all of you for participating. Thank you for being a part of a cooperative science, of all the cooperative science centers. I've been engaged with the cooperative science centers very close to its inception. And so I think I appreciate the hard work Dr. Robinson and others from the community did to help support this early on and show how important it really is. So we're not going to have a lot of time, so I want to get started here quickly and introduce what the challenge is. So today, you are all going to be NOAA employees for about 2 hours. And you're, as an NOAA employee, going to be looked upon and called upon to use your expertise to help us address a government-wide issue. And that government-wide issue is something you've heard about most recently from the Biden administration, and that's renewable energies, wind energy in particular. And so the Biden administration committed to making part of the ocean for use by wind energy farms. We got it? Okay, so this is a real life situation, and this is an example of what at NOAA we were asked to do. So within the Department of the Interior, there's an organization called the Bureau for Ocean Energy Management. And it's their responsibility to determine which parts of the coast of the US are available for gas, oil leasing for the federal government to lease to energy companies, part of the ocean, in particular part of the ocean floor for the gas and gas for leases. And so with the promotion of wind energy, a number of energy companies are looking to put wind farms not only in the center of the US, but also along our coasts. So you may have heard about this in the news. And so there was a commitment by the Biden administration to open up more of the space in the oceans for wind energy. And so BOEM, B-O-E-M, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, is responsible for identifying those parts of the coast that will be open and leased to energy companies. And so BOEM came to NOAA and said, in order for us to identify which parts of the coast we want to open up, we need input from across the government as to which areas can we open up. And so because NOAA has the expertise, the mission, the requirements for the ocean and the coasts, they came to us. And so within NOAA, we gathered together as all parts of NOAA, because this particular issue does impact all parts of our mission. And so we have a number of what we call line offices, those offices within our organization that are structured. You're mostly familiar with the National Weather Service, but we also have the National Ocean Service. We have our satellite service. We have our fisheries service. We have our research arm of NOAA. And we also have the branch that's focused on our aircraft and marine operations. And so all of us together were asked to come and evaluate and provide input to BOEM as to where those leases should be placed along the coast. And so we had to pull together people with disciplines, whether it's the meteorologist, whether it's oceanographers, whether it's fisheries biologists, whether it's engineers, whether it's our data scientists, and come up with recommendations for BOEM. That's what we're going to have you do today as part of this evaluation. So when you break up into your groups, you're going to take your specialty and think through, as it relates to what NOAA's mission is, about what BOEM needs to consider. And so you're going to have in each one of the groups some faculty members as well as NOAA employees that can help you guide this discussion. And what we want you to do is to think through, take the perspective of, let's say, a fisheries biologist, and the government is asking you, what part of the ocean should we open for wind turbines? And so think as a fisheries biologist, how will construction of a turbine, operation of a wind turbine, what things need to be considered before we can say, yeah, that part of the ocean will be acceptable to allow a wind turbine to exist and to operate for many years to come. And so this is exactly what we had to do. And we've provided here we go. Look, I got a presentation with only 10 minutes to spare. Okay, so let's go. If someone's controlling this for me, it looks like. Yes, I'm looking around. Okay, here we go. So go back one more slide, please. Okay, there we go. First slide then, next one. And so as I mentioned, we have the various line offices. So each one of you can work for one of these line offices depending on your specialty. Next slide. As I said, we have NESDIS, the Satellite Service, Marine Fisheries, National Ocean Service, National Weather Service, Oceanic and Atmospheric Research, or our Office of Marine and Operations Center. But this is important. NOAA's mission to understand and predict changes in climate, weather, oceans, and coasts, and to share this knowledge and information with others, and to conserve and manage coastal and marine ecosystems and resources. That's your mission today. So put your hat on, next slide. As I mentioned, the Biden administration has committed to jumpstarting offshore wind energy products. And so here's a good example of a schematic of some wind turbines in the ocean, and you can see along the ocean floor how they're attached in many ways. There's different technologies that can be used to put those wind turbines in the ocean. But we have to think through what happens to, let's say, habitats when you have to put one of those wind turbines there. What happens to migratory species when you have an operating wind turbine? What happens to marine navigation? What happens to the movement and migration of whales when you put a wind turbine in particular areas? What could be the potential impact on these wind turbines when hurricanes come by? What about climate change? How will it affect our ability to collect information from the ocean, whether it's physical data or biological data? These are all questions that BOEM's asking NOAA. And over the last year, we brought people together in NOAA to help answer some of these questions. Next slide, please. So I described a little bit about BOEM there too. Essentially, they're responsible for looking at the putting leases on the outer continental shelf. Next slide. So this gives you, the next slide gives you a little idea of the geographical region. There's the outer continental shelf. That's the domain that BOEM is looking at for putting those leases. So where in those areas, along the coast, should the federal government allow energy companies to lease for many decades that space and put wind energy turbines there? Next slide. And there I briefly talk about the missions of each one of our line offices. So I talked already a little bit about that. Next slide. Okay, so this is the task. And again, we're going to move a little quickly through this, but this is not intended for full all-day in-depth discussions. Instead, it's to really give you a flavor, a feel for the things that as a NOAA scientist you would be thinking about, that you'd be called upon. You know, reach back to the classes that you had. How do you apply the knowledge to these real world problems? This is what we deal with in NOAA. So each group represents the NOAA Ocean Wind Energy Team, okay? And each member will represent your discipline across one of our line offices. Okay. So as I said, BOEM is asking NOAA to provide input on which East Coast areas, we'll focus on the East Coast, within the outer continental shelf should be made available for leasing to companies that produce wind energy. These areas should be defined so as to protect biodiversity and promote ocean co-use. In other words, we need to be able to fish these areas as well as use them for energy. So your task is to identify what topics or issues that NOAA should consider when providing input to BOEM. Give consideration to cross-disciplinary topics that also include economic and social aspects. So part of this exercise is to also demonstrate the value and the importance of working across disciplines. Our problems that we deal with at NOAA cross many disciplines. And so it really requires specialists to come together and work together. And so that's one thing that we're trying to demonstrate here. So think cross-disciplinary. Look to the expertise of your colleagues at the table to help address some of these topics. So when you come back within your group, you'll identify a rapporteur, you'll identify a speaker, et cetera. But when you come back, each group will present the top 3 to 5 topics and suggest which NOAA line offices should be involved with that topic. And then you were to explain why you selected those topics and which do you think is the most important. So there are not a whole lot of rules to this exercise. You won't have a whole lot of time, but it will start to give you a feel for how do you use that degree that you obtained and worked so hard at and is valued as an employee of a federal agency. Next slide. I think I just have one more. Okay, yeah, so points to consider. I'll give you a little help here. How will a raise of wind turbines affects NOAA's ability to conduct its mission? I already talked about a number of those things. How we collect observations. How do we issue forecasts? How will it impact other stakeholders? Federal, state, local, tribal? We have a number of users and stakeholders that as a federal agency you must consider and work together with. What are potential socioeconomic impacts of constructing these wind turbines in the areas? How will it affect the fishing industry? What's the proximity to vulnerable communities? Are there location-specific impacts that should be considered? If you consider an East Coast ecosystems, what are our implications for fisheries, as I said, looking at threats to protected species? That's our responsibility within NOAA. Marine mammals and turtles all have to be considered. Surface and benthic organisms, marine habitats, number of things. How will the wind farms impact radar and weather forecasting for that area? Marine forecasting is still very important. That's part of our mission as well. And what type of research is needed to evaluate the environmental, social, and economic impacts? I think that's my last slide. Short and sweet. So let me turn it over to Dr. Kelly. She'll describe a little bit more about how we're going to break up, and then we'll bring you back. Thank you.
Okay, I know you can give him a little bit better hand than that. So at this time, you have a colored dot or a star on your badge. If you are a red star, you're gonna occupy this side of the room. This is my left, your right. If you are a blue star, you're gonna occupy this part of the room, my right, your left. If you are a green star, you're gonna occupy my left, your right at the back of the room. If you are a yellow star, you're gonna occupy my right, your left in the back of the room. Now, some of you have double stars. That means you're double good. All right, you'll get that in the parking lot. Well, okay. All right, so now, if you are a double red, go to the green section in the bleachers. My right, my left, your right. If you're a double blue, go to the bleachers. My right, your left. And if you have another double yellow or green, right here in the center in the bleachers. This direction and the challenge and those questions are in the app. How many of you got the app? Good. Somebody next to you have the app. So go look at your agenda. Under agenda for this section, you're going to find that PowerPoint you just saw. You're also going to see the questions that you're going to discuss. Faculty, you don't have a star. I need you to mingle into some of these groups. So you'll find a group either here in the front or in the back or in the bleachers. Now, where are my leaders? There are some NOAA leaders. You got papers in your hand. Would you move towards your section? And you're going to stand. So you know who you are. Okay, I only see, okay, I'm seeing some people move. Great. And the minute you're going to get up and do nothing, if nothing else, stretch your legs and breathe in and exhale. You know, if you have that Calm app or one of those other apps, it always tells you to breathe in, hold it, and let it out. So would you stand now, everyone? Please, come on, stand. I know you've been sitting a while. You might need to take a little break. You know, there are restrooms over here, there are restrooms up there, but find your group. Breathe in, let it out, and let's move to our sections. And if you get lost, I'm right here.
We'll come back right at 11:35, so whatever they do.
Okay, we're coming back at 11:35. But I will give you a 5-minute warning to let you know it's time to start moving back. Someone is going to challenge, be the recorder in your group.
Speakers to the stage, please. Got one speaker so far.
I'm just sending this by regular email to just make sure she has it.
Hey, can you hear me? Great. Can I have the orange speaker up, the blue speakers? Where's the red speaker? Where's the green? Double green, double blue. We need you up here on stage. Thank you.
Don't go nowhere.
You're moving great. See, the sooner you get here, the sooner we can get to the food over there.
Okay.
And it's smelling good. Thank you so much. Did you enjoy those sessions? Did you learn a lot?
Jennifer.
Great. And look, those of you who still need to put your posters up, go ahead and get those posters put up. The judging is going to start on tomorrow, but we need your poster up.
4:15 fan your meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. And meeting one.
All right, come on up, come on up. Get started. I heard a lot of great conversations. I think we need to hire you sooner rather than later to help us out with these problems.
Your time is just
So come on to the stage. Just come on up.
1:30.
And if you want to grab a chair, I
Gap
didn't realize we had so
Jennifer,
many
1:30.
speakers, but that's okay.
Oh, you got two people teaching the same session.
Dr. Kelly's
two
going to have
different
to
times.
remind me of the colors, or you all can remind me of the colors, and we can do that. Okay, so it looks like we're getting everyone to the stage. Everyone's seated
and
again.
just all
so
in the same slide. Got you.
I hope that you all had an opportunity, at least everyone had a chance to speak, at least in your groups. That's important. Your group dynamics. Within NOAA,
Jennifer.
we certainly need everyone
She's right
speaking at
here.
the table. We all bring something to these topics. And so it's critically important that as
Okay,
an
and then
employee
the
that
other
you
one is
feel
Williams.
like you can contribute. And so at NOAA, we try to encourage that. I certainly do it
So he's there.
my
I'm gonna
laboratory,
resend
and I'll
yours.
make that plug right now
And
since
who
I get
else?
the stage. So Dr. Kelly said, I'm the director of the Atlantic Oceanographic and Meteorological Laboratory right here in the state of Florida. We're located down in Miami and Biscayne, Key Biscayne. And our laboratory really addresses a number of the topics that you all talked about here, as well as many others. And as Louisa Koch mentioned earlier, this NERTO opportunity gives all the CSC students an opportunity to go to a laboratory like mine, but there are many other, and work on these kinds of problems. These are the kinds of things that you will work on. The positions and the NERTOs that we have are not simply kind of a student assistant type of position. We hope to really engage you in our problems, our issues. You will conduct and work with us to do research. So that will be valuable experience for you to put on a resume and get exposed to what a federal agency is like to work for. It helps you to establish networks. We are highly encouraged to reach out to our scientists while you're on a NERTO to talk about your career. What are options for you? How do I get a job? What did you do in this situation? Those kinds of things are available for you when you do these NERTOs as well. So you should take a lot of care in just determining where you want to do your NERTOs. This is a great opportunity. We've had a number of NERTO students down at AOML, at the laboratory I work at. We do work on hurricanes. We fly into hurricanes. We do work in ecosystems. We take small boats and large boats out to the ocean and ecosystems. We study ocean chemistry.
Mhm.
We study
That's
ecosystems.
where I was already
We
at.
look at physical
Okay.
oceanography.
Should
We
have got
study the
both of them
Atlantic
out.
Ocean basin.
No,
But
let
this
me
is just
stay
my
up there.
lab. We have a number of laboratories that do those kinds of things, just in OAR. NERDOs are available for all line offices. So I would encourage you to do that. All right, good. That's my plug. Look us up, aoml.noaa.gov. In the meantime, it looks like we've assembled quite the crew on the stage, which is going to represent all of you.
And
So
what's
I'm
the name?
anxiously waiting to hear from each of the groups. Now, we're going to
I'll
move
just
this a
go
little
with Charles.
quickly since we don't have too much time. We do have lunch
Oh.
here, as Dr. Kelly mentioned. So we're scheduled to go till 12:15, but lunch is officially
BIP.
starting at 12:30. And as soon as we finish, you can get started on the
That
lunch.
should be unique
So
enough. I have
with
8
that, let me turn it over to double blue stars right here first.
All right. Hi, everybody. Can you hear
Is
me?
this them right here? Yeah.
There we go. I'm shorter than the last speaker. So my name's Hillary, and I'm representing the Double Blue Group.
Yes.
And so we
All right. You need to
identified
verify they
5
have their
of our
links
top
though.
concerns
Sometimes
for
it
the
may
wind
go
turbines.
into
Our first
junk
concern
or
was the
clutter.
location of the turbine and how it might impact
Just
be impacted by
I
currents
try
in
to.
the area.
You don't have
and
no way of
also the
contacting them,
migration
do you?
paths of whales and fishes and the larvae.
Oh.
And so the
Hold
NOAA
on.
line
Let
offices
me
that might be useful in
let me
helping
just
us
try
tackle
sending
this
them an email
question
real
is
quick.
the
Hold on.
OAR and the National Marine
Sometimes the
Fisheries
automated
Service.
way
Our second
sees it
concern
as
was the
junk or
construction of the
trash,
turbines,
even though I
regarding the
whitelisted them.
materials that they are
Let's see.
being used and what you might do afterwards with disposing the materials. And useful offices would be, again, the Ocean Research Office and the Marine Aviation Office, as well as other federal entities that might be useful participants. Our third objective was the climate impacts of these turbines, including
Okay,
both
and
how the climate that they're in is impacting the turbines and also how the turbines impact the climate. And the National Weather Service would be
just see them
the
all and
third
say if
office
you
to
received the
consider
invite or
further.
not.
Our fourth objective is the human dimensions of this wind turbine,
Let me know.
including how commercial
Okay.
fishermen and tribes might
All
be
right.
using the area that the turbine is
Mhm.
in and how tourism might be impacted, as well as
Yeah,
navigation.
yeah.
And again, the Fisheries Service and ocean research would be very useful. And finally, our last objective was the conflicting use of the area that the turbines are in, whether that be what habitats are there and what noise is produced, as well as like the national waters and other policy that might be impacted. And that would be Marine Fisheries Service and state and tribal partners, as well as other federal entities. We also identified socioeconomic impacts of the turbines, including fishing, tourism, noise, proximity to vulnerable communities that may not have as much of a voice in the decision-making process, and the costs and benefits of the turbines in those areas. And areas of research that we identified were seafloor mapping, fisheries surveys, existing weather, climate, and current data that we could utilize in modeling or other projects, and habitat assessment and risk assessment. Did I get everything? Thank you.
All right. Who wants to go next? Double green? Okay. All right, we'll do the double green group next.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Will Lyons. I'm a PhD student here at Florida Agricultural Mechanical University.
Oh yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Joe Day. I'm a master's student at Savannah State University.
As we went through our analysis, we focused on stakeholder engagement and interdisciplinary studies that would be used to tackle this environmental issue. As far as local businesses, the fishermen and restaurants and tribal communities will be involved in the discussions going forward. The NGOs and whatever role they may play. Regionally, we look at the associations of fishermen, whether it be shrimp fishermen or fisheries and their involvement in the discussion. From a national level, we look at NOAA, maybe the Office of Legislative and Intergovernmental Affairs, because we know that Congress has the power to spend. So the money for the budget and the building of those wind turbines would be necessary, the NIH, the CDC, and those things as well. As far as interdisciplinary studies, the young lady mentioned meteorology. So those, the weather whether that short time or for the long term, the climate changes that would occur because of the changes in the local environment because of the building of the wind turbines, oceanography, fisheries research, harmful algal bloom research here in Florida. If we were to go forward with a project that utilizes the wind turbines, we would have the issue of those red tides being moved around because of the changes of the wind and water movement and the persistence of brevetoxins. Environmental policy, we'd have to build a technical force, right? Task force that would allow us to build those turbines correctly. Atmospheric chemistry, geology, and risk communication to the public on what those potential risks could be with the influx of tourists and the building of the turbines.
Thanks, Will. And one of the things we quickly realized that this is a more than an hour-long discussion. So I just came up here to help Will out, and we had such a brilliant conversation. So I just wanted to articulate some of the other points that we mentioned previously. So from a physiological standpoint, for the physics standpoint, we don't want these wind turbines to disrupt the connectivity between the estuarine environment and those shelf waters, because a lot of the shelf and waters, they depend on like mesoscale eddies that are wind driven, and they're a product of the Gulf Stream and wind direction and wind patterns. So we don't want to disrupt the connectivity between those two water masses. And secondly, from a biological standpoint, we really don't want to disrupt the foraging dynamics of like sound producing marine mammals, like common bottlenose dolphins. So like my thesis advisor, she would be very mad at me if I didn't mention common bottlenose dolphins, as they commonly echolocate in the environment. So we don't want the obstruction of these wind turbines to disrupt that feeding phenomenon and that foraging behavior. And then secondly, we really don't want these turbines to disrupt any local weather patterns, like Will mentioned previously as well. And then from a conservation standpoint, we really just want to articulate our scientific objectives in an efficient and effective manner to the general public. So we want to promote community engagement and anything that can articulate our science knowledge without having complex reports or assessment reports on this one of these wind turbines. So we really want to have a good platform to provide that mode of communication. So those are some things that came to mind in our discussion. Thank you.
Okay, we'll hear from the single star red group next.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Maya McWilliams, a senior biology major at Jackson State University, and I had the honor of being with the red team. And we came up with 4 topics that we thought were of importance. So the first topic that we came up with was biogeospatial analysis, and this would be with NESDIS. And we will be basically looking at the location selection, basing it off of wind strength to ensure that we're putting it in places that would be impactful, but then also looking at weather impacts in that location to ensure that we're not putting it in a place where it wouldn't produce as much energy or putting it in a place where it would destroy the windmills. And we also were looking at the benthic habitats in these areas using remote sensing. The next thing that we thought was of importance was the socioeconomic aspects, basically looking at residential community reception to ensure that the people in these areas are receptive and engaged in the project that's going on. And we want to ensure that environmental justice is put in the upfront in this project to ensure that we're not putting these windmills in communities that aren't being represented. Additionally, we want to look at the construction logistics to ensure that we're making small businesses a part of the project, and also looking at existing energy companies to ensure that everything is just equal and that everyone has an opportunity to be a part of it. The next thing that we thought was of importance was the ecological data assessment, and this would be with NMFS and with NOS, looking at fish stocks and the fish population in the area, and also looking at the benthic habitats to ensure that we're not infringing on the populations that are already there. And lastly, what we thought was of importance was the continued monitoring and studies. This would be with the fisheries services, ocean services, and with NESDIS And basically, we will be looking at the future climate change impacts and the long-term impacts of the windmill farms in these areas. So thank you.
All right, hearing lots of great ideas here. Let's go to the orange team.
What you listening to that?
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. My name is Kylie. I am a master's student at Texas A&M University Corpus Christi. So my group, the Orange Group, was a pretty large group. So we ended up breaking into 4 different groups to talk about some subtopics. One of the first subtopics that a group talked about was the socioeconomic impacts. And a lot of this was focused on what the impacts would be to the local community where these wind turbines ended up being. One of the main things about that was ensuring that there was environmental justice in this project, making sure that, like previous groups have mentioned, these projects didn't just get pushed onto less affluent areas where those negative impacts potentially could be consolidated, and making sure that those more affluent areas, which are present a lot on the coast, aren't able to just push those off onto less affluent areas. And considering what the impacts would be on the local community of having these wind turbines, if it would impact the current jobs that people in that area have, if it would create new jobs for them, if there's fishing in the area, how would that be impacted for the people who conduct those fishing jobs? Would it change the fish that are available? And different things like that. If there's tourism, how would tourism potentially be impacted? One thing that we did talk about was a lot of these newer projects for wind turbines that are coming out have artificial reefs at their base, and talking about if those artificial reefs could create new habitat for potentially increasing recreational fishing or even potentially scuba diving and things like that in the area. So could there be positive impacts from this? And considering the potential scenic impact for these coastal communities from these wind turbines, a lot of people don't want to have their visual of the ocean interrupted. So trying to find a balance there. A lot of our discussion kind of focused on trying to minimize the potential impacts of like the scenic impact. Is it best to just have it so far away that you can't really see them? But then the trade-off of having them far away, you have to increase the cost. So a lot of trade-offs in that area. And then the second topic we talked about was benthic and surface impacts. So to make these wind turbines, you have to do seismic surveying, which is going to create noise pollution. There's obviously going to be construction, which is going to impact the benthic area. You have to drill into the area. What populations are you going to be impacting by doing this drilling? We thought it would be best to try to stay away from benthic communities and potentially use the artificial reefs as the opportunity to grow or reintroduce benthic communities. So trying to avoid communities that are thriving and potentially try to introduce them to a new area. We also talked about the fact someone in our group mentioned that this was about oil pipelines. There's about a 4-kilometer radius around an oil pipeline that is negatively impacted by the implementation of an oil pipeline, and there are going to have to be cables running from a wind turbine that would essentially be the same kind of idea of an oil pipeline. So not even just considering the spot impact of the wind turbine construction, but also the fact of laying all the cables to get the energy back to the coast. And then also considering the fact that there will have to be land infrastructure for these wind turbines to store the energy, to get the energy back and distribute the energy. So where is that land infrastructure going to go? It kind of all ties back all into each other with environmental justice again. Another group that we had talked about fisheries and weather. So we want to make sure that there's going to be no negative impact on weather patterns like people have mentioned, and also potentially trying to pick an area where the likelihood of a hurricane or other severe weather event is going to be lower to ensure that the wind turbines aren't disturbed or destroyed. We also talked about potential corrosion of materials that is used to create the wind turbines with the salinity and the sea spray, considering the impacts of that and choosing materials wisely. And excuse me. The potential impact to fisheries, again, with the artificial reefs, are we going to be able to help fisheries? Are we going to be changing fisheries with these artificial reefs in areas where they get installed? And we can also consider filter feeder recruitment that can happen with these artificial reefs, which is very important, like mussels and oyster recruitment in these areas, which can actually, if it's close to the coast, help to mitigate coastal erosion. So that's another positive potential impact. And then something our last group talked about was marine mammals and turtles. And a big topic in that group was the impact of boat traffic, which I think another group talked about as well. Boat traffic has a big impact on dolphins and other marine mammals that use echolocation or similar things to communicate with each other. And that is an impact both while the wind turbines are being created and for the maintenance of the wind turbines. Boat traffic is going to have to keep going out to these wind turbines to service them. So how is this boat activity going to impact these creatures? And then there's also just going to be noise pollution potentially from the wind turbines because they do create noise. So is this going to discourage certain creatures from being in these areas, or how is that going to impact them? And we also wanted to make a point that even though there are potentially a lot of negative things that seem like it could have negative impacts on the area, it also is still a good thing to have these wind turbines because we can replace oil energy. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Orange Group. Green Group next, come on up. Oh, what yellow? Sorry. Yellow Group, come up next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rose Leager, and I have the privilege of being a NOAA EPP undergraduate scholar at Nova Southeastern University. Today, I'm representing the Yellow Group and specifically NOAA Fisheries. So for our viewpoint from NOAA Fisheries, we agree that the wind turbines would be beneficial under certain circumstances. So if they put the wind turbines where they can mitigate the damage of hurricanes, along with the presence of reefs and overall just reduce the impacts of coastal environments, then we would be for it. We recommend probably areas within the Northeast since that's where there's less likely of hurricane damage and coral reef impact, along with the fact that ocean life and water chemistry have to be in consideration, specifically with the marine mammals that migrate. We also need to make sure that the fisheries industry is educated and aware of where the wind turbines are going, and that we also keep an eye out for any microplastics or contamination that could come from the wind turbine, since we don't want anything to bioaccumulate in the ocean.
Hello, everybody. I'm Timur Barry. I'm coming from the perspective of NOS and the OPR. I believe that this should definitely begin with the consultation of the Fish and Wildlife Services and Office of Protected Resources in the upholding of the Endangered Species Act, which not only looks to assess protections for, let's say, fish and other benthic species, but also extends to crucial habitats. Including this, there are also the National Marine Sanctuary Systems and a number of other protected reefs that extend from 10 to 20 to even 25 miles offshore. So we would definitely put forth that any activities take place further from this.
Hello, my name is Ignacio Rueda. I'm an undergraduate researcher in the Barr Marine Ecology Lab at Texas A&M. We felt that how wind turbines affect coastal communities was very important. So we felt that conducting surveys, talking to communities rather than imposing certain actions by the government was the most best way to have communities voice their opinions on how it would impact them and the possible benefits that would be introduced into those communities. This way we can understand the proximity and how the distance between the coastline and how far away we can put those actual wind turbines. And we felt that floating turbines would probably be the best, would be beneficial. That way we can mitigate the amount of sedimentation that would be imposed upon like smothering oysters or even habitats for juveniles for fish and migrating fish. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Donald Long. I was representing the National Weather Service and also NESDIS for the yellow team. So for the Weather Service, we really wanted to take a look at both severe weather and societal implications for the turbines. So for the severe weather side, we just wanted to make sure that in terms of radar impacts, in terms of the actual weather impacts themselves, that there that those considerations were made. So using the Weather Service to take a look at things like whether or not the turbines would show up on radar, take a look at just kind of assess severe weather impacts, especially in terms of like hurricanes, things like that. And then from the satellite side, we had some good input from the group as well. So especially using the satellites to get a sense of maybe upper level dynamics, get a sense of like even using the clouds to kind of inform how the potential wind farms, wherever they are, pairing up with our other partners, of course, but looking at how they would, how any impacts there. So bringing in NESDIS to take a look at the satellites.
Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Toledo. I'm a master's student of the Marine Science Department of the University of Puerto Rico at Maya West. I just want to send like a general message about the project and about us in general. Sorry if I get a bit shy. I believe we should put this project in a scale between placing the wind turbines and the marine ecosystem. By placing, before placing this, we need to obviously assess the environment, but also if the environment is perfect to place these wind turbines, we need to make sure or at least know what this could the placement of these turbines could affect. If it could unbalance the environment by creating a disturbance in general. And the message in general is that we as human, we've been trying to survive in this planet, right? Sadly, we indirectly or directly are affecting the whole planet in many ways. We need to remember that this planet is our home. So one way or another, being involved in many projects in general, we are affecting our house. So we gotta do things thinking and sometimes forget about money. So yeah, I think that's the message.
All right, thanks to the yellow team. Who do we have back here? Blue? Yeah, blue, single star blue.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gerardo. I'm a master's student at Bethune-Cookman University in Daytona Beach, Florida. Our group decided to choose 3 topics of interest. The first one I'm going to talk to you about is coastal communities. We were worried if those communities would accept the implementation of those wind turbines within their vicinity, if the power lines from those turbines will run through their communities, if they're willing to accept it there, how the human use areas of where those turbines will be installed will affect the communities there. If it's an area used for recreation, if it's used for transport, if it's used for shipping, and then also the public opinions of those coastal communities and how they feel about getting that there. We'd also like to collect baseline data of those communities, the demographics, the economics of the areas, how they make their livings, and then also a public education aspect where we will get NIMS and the Office of Education involved to help and communicate trade-offs and benefits of getting those turbines there. The second topic was turbine materials and data. We discussed how land lease agreements will have to align with NOAA's mission to get those turbines there, and of course with federal, state, and local laws, as at each level they kind of differ from one another. We also wanted to include the weather service and or will help us guide in how we conduct the research from that, and then the weather service will say the research. We also wanted to include the satellite service on how we will collect the data from the turbines, and also on how to include devices on the turbines that, instead of running power lines, as I mentioned before, through coastal communities, it'll be sent up via satellites and then pinged down and distributed as needed be. The third topic that I wanted to talk about is the marine resources, which we will get NIMS and the NOS to help with that. They will help us in the collection of baseline data and migrational routes of species at the benthic, pelagic, and the surface zones, and as well as avian and marine mammals. They will also help us in figuring out a temporal scale on how to study those organisms, and help us observe the changes in their patterns. I'd like to mention that the ESA is going to be an important factor in that, as if the area where the turbines are to be implemented is habitat for a species under the ESA, it will not work out. And that's it.
Great. Okay, double red group.
Hi, my name is Devin Marie Gately. I'm a third-year marine science major at California State University, Monterey Bay, and I'm also a NOAA EPP MSI scholar, so really happy to be here with you all today. On behalf of the Double Red Star, I'm representing National Marine Fisheries Service. So I have two recommendations to offer to counteract this problem that we're all facing. So the first is to identify high productivity areas off the East Coast and avoid constructing these offshore wind farms in those areas, as they have the potential to disrupt surface waters, because disruption of phytoplankton distribution has the potential to disrupt the movement of highly migratory species. The second of my two recommendations is to possibly counteract any negative impacts caused by offshore wind farms through developing artificial reefs using the standing structures, and conduct research to assess if this would be enough to counteract any negative impacts. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Allison Segura. I am from the University of Texas at El Paso, and I'm a graduate student in environmental science. I'm representing the National Weather Service. Our first recommendation is to consider the terrain at which we are placing these wind turbines. We would want to consider a flat area with little to no topographical relief to produce more accurate data. Our second recommendation is the implementation of prevailing wind potential data. We want to look at past and present weather and wind pattern trajectories, as well as alternative weather that may be produced due to the microclimates that are created by the wind turbines. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danielle Chambers, and I attend Howard University, and I'll be representing NOS. So two recommendations that we had were basically reaching out to local stakeholders to find out about data and research on the local migratory patterns and nesting patterns of the local mammal species that are there. We don't want the wind turbines to potentially impact those species. And the second recommendation that we had was really to look at the local traffic that the turbines will be placed in, considering that's a local coastal area.
We don't want to interrupt any shipping for import or export or tourism that's going on in the area as well.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. My full name is Timothy Aaron Medina. I go by Teyame, and my pronouns are they, them. I am a EPP MSI scholar representing NOAA CESART in the PhD program for Earth and Environmental Sciences at the CUNY Graduate Center. Today, I had the pleasure of working very closely with the Red Star group. We had 2 stars. Woohoo. And I specifically had 2 selected teammates where we represented the National Environmental Satellite Data and Information Service. Provided now are going to be our 2 recommendations for potential wind farms within the future of the blue economy. We would hope that the wind farms would utilize existing environmental informations about migratory tracks to construct a network of wind turbines that will increase habitat wildlife, monitor transporting organisms, heat, nutrition, and wind, as well implement infrastructure that will aid management practices in existing fisheries. And then our second recommendation is there should be an algorithmic implementation into existing satellite architecture that will account for changes wind farms create over time. Thank you for listening.
All right, Green Group.
Hi, everyone. My name is Selena Bolela. I am from Penn State University, and I'm a part of the Green Group. I am with 2 others. I'm with Jalen and Jordan. Our group was really cool. We had a lot of people who had a lot to say, so we're going to separate into 3 different subjects. First one I'm going to discuss is the atmospheric and ocean relationship, and then length, depth, and distance, and the overall design and its function. So basically, we're focusing on decreasing the impact on marine life, and of course, we want to be energy efficient. So focusing on the East Coast, we weren't really sure which one was better than the other because the north part of the East Coast and the south part also has its pros and cons. So in the north part of the East Coast, there is young ocean water. Young ocean water is significantly, that means there is more oxygen in the water. And when there's more oxygen in the water, it is more suitable for marine life. So we would naturally want to go to the southeast coast to protect the marine life because marine life gets scared. They like to stay away from human sources. And moving our wind turbines into the south would be where the oldest ocean water is, where they would be not there because marine life can't survive in anoxic regions, which is basically regions where there's not much oxygen. So in the north, the wind stress of the ocean water is rather strong in the winter because in the winter time it's more stormy and the mixed layer depth of the ocean is more stratified, and that would play a big role in that. And then in the south part of the East Coast, there's also hurricanes. So in this mixed layer, the hurricanes would incur more mixing, and when there's more mixing, you can imagine there's going to be upwelling, and in those anoxic regions there's not much oxygen, so when we bring the upwelling of the non-oxygen up to the surface, not much marine life would be there as compared to the north, so that would play a big role as well. And we will also consult with the National Weather Service and the National Ocean Service concerning these topics with the weather systems. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jalen Leslie. I am a current LMR CSC graduate fellow at Hampton University. And I'm going to talk a little bit about distance, depth, and proximity of the wind turbines. So in terms of depth, we were concerned about what depth we should be building these wind turbines in terms of making sure they are structurally sound, as well as the maintenance of them and people having to be scuba certified to provide maintenance on these turbines. And then in terms of proximity, we discussed the proximity of these wind turbines to the coastline in terms of ecotourism and how that would impact the economics of coastal communities that rely heavily on ecotourism, as well as the amount of wind turbines that we are implementing and compensating for the ecological impact. So one suggestion that we had was, like, for every one wind turbine that we build, we also implement an artificial reef, because these locations where the wind turbines are being built, they may be serving as marine protected areas. So that would decrease, fishery efforts as well as recreational efforts. So moving these artificial reefs to locations further away from these wind turbines may still allow for those efforts to continue. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Jordan Ambrose, a junior meteorology major from Jackson State University, and I am going to discuss the ecological and economic impacts that could help us in the future. So we talked about having multiple turbines on one platform so we can capture wind at all levels, and that will help us from an economic standpoint, because by building less turbines, we would save millions and billions of dollars, but we can still maximize the impact of the wind energy. And that's something that we would like to discuss possibly in the future. We also discussed things about sound pollution and how that can have an ecological impact on fish and birds. And we also discussed how changing the colors of the panels of the turbines to reduce deaths of migrating birds, because studies show that a lot of birds do die from these turbines, and the mission is to help the ocean and, of course, the ecosystem itself. So by changing the colors of those panels of the turbines, we can reduce deaths in birds, and we can also reduce the sound pollution by building these single platforms with multiple turbines on them. We also discussed our economic impact, and the economic impact that we did see is by having these turbines in these ocean areas. Of course, you have to come and realize that you have hurricanes, you have nor'easters. So we also believe that by having these more spread out, we can reduce the economic impact of the damage due to these seasonal severe weather events. Thank you.
Wow, that's all I can say. Boy, you got all of that in about an hour's time. See what a group can accomplish when you bring so many disciplines together and you are focused on a particular issue. So I think this gives at least a little bit of feel for the complexity of some of the things that we're talking about. This is the responsibility of the federal government here that we're working on. And so I wanted to, the audiovisual folks can put the website, the first website up I wanted to mention. So as I said, this is real. This is stuff that we've really been working on. And there was a real push to get these leases out and the bids out and things like that. I'm gonna wait for our website. But just in February, Department of Interior announced that they had the highest, they put out 6 areas. They identified 6 areas that were up for lease. And they drew, the competition drew over $4 billion in requests for those leases. So they awarded them to 6 people notionally there. There's the headlines there. That's the most that they've ever had in terms of any offshore, including oil and gas. So wind energy is up and coming for sure. And over ocean areas is an area that's very attractive. Next, if you could bring up the next website and scroll down a little bit for me, there's a map right there. So you can see that's New York at the very top. New York City is indicated there. So that gives you the idea of the projection. Each one of those colored areas represents one of those 6 areas that BOEM identified, Department of Interior identified, that would be bid upon for a lease. So it gives you a sense of, at least in this area of the coast, this isn't inclusive of everything that will be awarded eventually, but this is an example. This was the first area that came out under the Biden administration. And so it gives you an idea of the kind of the size of the areas that they're talking about and the geographical location that they selected. You can see some were further offshore, okay? And so there was a lot of discussion, a number of the topics you all talked about that went into these final decisions. So it really gives you a feel for the kinds of things that once you graduate, once you get a job, that you'll be engaged in. And you can be engaged in these things today, even, as I said, to the NERDO experiences. And so other opportunities through the whole EPP MSI program. All right, so with that, let me thank all of our groups for an outstanding presentation. And congratulate all of you for really keeping us on time. I didn't think we would do it, but again, more efficiency here from this group for sure. So with that, we are done with the student challenge, and I'll turn it back over to Dr. Kelly. Thank you very much.
Leave the stage.